I'm about to show you a simple riff that'll allow you to play the blues in any key. And not just that, but this riff is so versatile that you can make little changes to it and play it over pretty much any style of blues, also in any key. But as always, be sure to stick around till the very end of the lesson because I'll have a free gift for you and your guitar, and you're both gonna love it. All right, now let's take a look at this riff. So we're gonna kick it off in the key of A. And obviously, since this is a blues we're talking about, a blues rhythm particularly, we're gonna be focusing on the chord changes. So we have a 1 chord, a 4 chord, and a 5 chord. So in the key of A, that would be A, D, and E. These are all dominant, so A7, D7, and E7. And this riff essentially highlights the important chord tones necessary to imply those chord changes, right? So we're gonna start with the 1 chord. This is gonna be the series of notes that are gonna cover the 1 chord for this riff. All right, so let's take a look at each of these notes. So we have our root, 5th fret on low E, we have our major 3rd, 4th fret on A, then we have our perfect 5th, 7th fret on A, then we have our major 6th, 4th fret on D, and then 5th fret on D for our flat 7. Each of these notes are important to imply this chord, the A major chord. And now to highlight the 4 chord, right, D7, we're gonna do the same exact thing, the same exact finger pattern, just a string down. So starting on the 5th fret on the A string, there's our root, then 4th fret on D is our major 3rd, 7th fret's our perfect 5th, 4th fret on G now is our major 6th, and then we have our flat 7th here on the 5th fret. Same exact thing as this, right? As far as what those chord tones are and the fact that the finger pattern's the exact same. And then for the 5 chord, E7, we do the same exact thing that we just did with D7, but we move it up 2 frets, right? So 1, 2. So we have 7th fret on A, 6th fret on D, 9th fret on D, 6th fret on G, 7th fret on G. So if I were to play all that in context in a 12-bar blues, let's say in a mid-tempo kind of shuffle, it'd be something like this. So that was a complete 12-bar blues using that riff in that particular style. But if we wanted to make a slight change to make it a little bit more, even a little bit more bluesy, a little bit more dominant heavy, right? Really focusing on that flat 7. One thing we could do is just skip that major 6th altogether and do something like this. Right, so I'm still playing it at that same kind of tempo, that same shuffle, but I'm skipping that major 6 altogether. Now the challenge with that is, at least the way that I play it, once we use our 2nd finger here to hit that flat 7 there on the 5th fret of the D string, we got to jump it right back up to the 5th fret on the low E string to start it over. Now, if you wanted to, you could kind of try to finesse using another finger, but every time I do that, it somehow feels less natural than just jumping back up with my 2nd finger. So I essentially just do that. I just make sure that I jump it, back up to the low E string in time, And even though it's a little bit of work, but to me, it's a lot more, it just makes more sense than if I were to try using, let's say, my 3rd finger, if you have particularly big hands, you could probably get away with doing that a little bit more comfortably and smoothly. But me, on the other hand, that's just how I do it. I like to just jump, like I said, from the D string back up to the low E string. So when you're doing that with each of these for the chord changes, just make sure that you work in a tempo that's comfortable, so you're not stopping the whole, the whole groove just because you're having to jump your finger, to that next string. So start at a slower tempo just to get used to it. Give yourself time to think, you know? And the more, you know, as you get more accustomed to it, you can start to up the tempo and play a little bit faster. But what if we wanted to omit the flat 7 and just play the major 6? So we play root, major 3rd, perfect 5th, 6th, right? It sounds something like this. You know, so a different sound. It sounds a bit more bluesy with that flat 7. Because, like I said, you know, with those 7th chords, you know, that flat 7 is an integral part of that. So it's important to imply that, you know, pretty obviously, so it gives it that extra bluesy kind of sound. Now, if I were to play like a country, like honky-tonk kind of shuffle, I think that major 6 would actually work better. You know, like there are a ton of 90s country songs that's like what the bass is doing, you know, following that and then really emphasizing that major 6, you know. And then if they want to do that flat 7, it's like going back and forth between the two. So they can both work together, or you can just use one or the other between the flat 7 and the major 6 and you get a different vibe. And if you wanted to get crazy, you could double time it and then you'll be in rockabilly boogie woogie territory, you know. All that's just to show you how versatile this riff is, because if you make little changes to it and even change the tempo, you got yourself a completely new riff for a completely new style. Oh, and hey, by the way, if you're getting value out of this lesson, do me a favor and hit that like button and consider subscribing to our YouTube channel if you haven't already. Not only does it really help us out, but it lets us know that you like these lessons and you'd like to see more of them. And believe me, I got a whole lot more coming for you. So thanks in advance, and let's get back to business. Okay, so we've covered this riff in the key of A, but how do we move it to different keys? Well, all we gotta do is just find the root note to the new key on the low E string. So let's say, for example, we wanted to move it to the key of C, all right? So we already covered the key of A, which is the 5th fret of the low E. If you wanted to find C, it happens to be right here, 8th fret of the low E string. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna essentially fill in the space with the same exact finger pattern, the same exact movement and everything that we just covered with A, but it just happens to now be in the key of C. And by the way, if you don't currently know how to name every note on the low E string to help you find different keys, don't worry, I got something that's gonna help you with that. But in the meantime, just take my word for it. 8th fret on the low E string, that's C. So if we were to fill in this riff, right? Root, major 3rd, 5th, major 6th, flat 7, right? So we have 8th fret, 7th fret to 10th fret on A, right, the A string, and then 7th fret to 8th fret on the D string. And then if we wanted to do it over the 4 chord, F7, we do the same thing, right? It'd be 8th fret on A, 7th fret to 10th fret on D, 7th fret to 8th fret on G. And then for the 5 chord, G7, it'd be 10th fret on A, 9th to 12th on D, 9th to 10th on G. Right? So you're really essentially playing the same riff, just you're like kind of changing keys with each chord change. So you're implying this whole chord progression without actually playing full chords, you know? That's the cool thing about it, is when you highlight chord changes, you imply the chords without actually having to play them. So it's like you're injecting the tonality of the chords into the listener's head, and you can actually get away with playing through the chord progression. It's like you're simulating it without actually doing it. And the same thing applies in the key of C if you wanted to change up the picking pattern, or, you know, take out the major 6th or take out the flat 7 or whatever. You can do that same thing where you can stylistically match up with a whole different style of blues that even gets into like I mentioned before, country, rockabilly. It just taps into that pool of different styles without really having to do much to change what you're actually playing. All right, now let's take it to one more key. Let's just drive the point home that this is just a movable thing that can work in any key, right? Let's try the key of G, for example. So right here, 3rd fret on the low E, that is the key of G. So that would be the root note, right? The tonic of our 1 chord, G7. So we'd have 3rd fret on low E, 2nd fret to 5th fret on A, and 2nd fret to 3rd fret on D. Another thing I love about this riff is it's very piano-like, you know? You could totally hear like a low octave piano doing something like that, right? But if you happen to be in a situation where you're gonna play some blues and you don't have a piano player, then it's all gonna fall on you. But I digress. We're moving on to the 4 chord, doing the same thing, right? Just a string below. So 3rd fret on A, 2nd fret to 5th fret on D, 2nd fret to 3rd fret on G. And no matter what key we're playing in or what chord in the chord progression we're playing over, if we're doing the blues with this particular riff, we're playing the same chord tones. We're playing root, major 3rd, 5th, major 6th, flat 7, over the 3 chords in a chord progression in any given key. And so if we're to do the 5 chord, you know, the key of G, which is D7, so we'd be, right, 5th fret on A, 4th fret to 7th fret on D, 4th fret to 5th fret on G. So there you have it. I mean, you can see how this is just moved across the fretboard to accommodate different keys. As long as you stick with that 1-4-5 formula, following those chord tones, and then you can get creative as far as which notes you want to omit. You know, I would recommend if you're going to throw out any note, it would most likely be either that major 6th or the flat 7, or maybe even the major 3rd, depending, you know, if you wanted to do that like more neutral kind of like blues shuffle, like, which that right there is essentially like what you're doing is you're doing the root note and then it's octave, then flat 7 and the 5th, you know. Something a bass player would normally play. And by the way, we have multiple lessons on the Guitar Master Method YouTube channel where we cover like this particular riff, you know, and its uses. But in this lesson, we're doing this, which like has the same soul, but it's a completely different, more nuanced sort of style. And that's the cool thing about the blues. There's so many different nuances and styles under the umbrella of blues, you know, between like regional styles like Texas blues, Chicago blues, Mississippi Delta blues. You also have different styles based on tempo, like slow blues or jump blues, to name a couple. I mean, there's a whole lot going on. And whatever blues style you're familiar with, you can just adapt it to this riff framework that we just went over. And then voila, you got yourself a blues riff that you can bust out if you're jamming with some buddies, or if you're at a local blues jam, or even if you want to record your own blues song. And before I end this lesson, I'm gonna play through 12 bars of this riff. I'm gonna go back to the key of A and just show it to you one more time. So there you have it, a blues riff so versatile that you can make slight changes to it and play it over pretty much any blues style, and you can move it to any key on the fretboard just by using the low E string as your guide. And now that you made it to the end of the video, I gotta make good on my promise and give you that free gift I was talking about. Oh, and by the way, remember when I said that if you can't name every note on the low E string to find different keys, that I'd be able to help you out with that? Well, it just so happens to do with that free gift in question. And without further ado, here it is. This right here is a comprehensive lesson on how to instantly solo in any key. And the first thing that you're gonna learn in this lesson is how to find any key just using the low E string. And it is yours 100% free just for hanging out with me today. Just be sure to click here to claim your copy or check that link in the description box. One thing I love about using a riff like this is it pretty much puts you in a position to handle any kind of blues jam situation you find yourself in. All you gotta do is establish what rhythm you're playing in and what key, and you're good to go.